Ouch! What do you do? Well, I'll tell you what you don't do, and that's move away from this channel. This is Brian from the Gossicles and Space Couch, and you're watching Chris, the old-ass retro gamer, right here.
Hey everybody, Chris, the old-ass retro gamer here, back with another video game collection live stream 2020. Today, it's all about the Game Boy, the handheld console, the first one Nintendo made. Super successful, one of the most successful consoles ever, as far as I remember reading about. Maybe, possibly, could be, maybe this morning. Yeah, I'm super stoked to be talking about this console. I need to do some revisions on my memory of things. So today, before I picked the Game Boy to talk about in the stream. What's up, Mondane? How's it going? Welcome. I was doing some research to see which consoles releases, what order they came out in so that I could do the streams in order of release. And I was like, I can't remember which came out first, the Game Boy or the Genesis. Turns out the Game Boy came out a couple months before. And I'm looking at the date of the Game Boy, and the Game Boy came out in July of July of 1989. Well, we got our Game Boy my brother and I each got Game Boys for Christmas that year that it came out in 1989. And I've been saying that we got our NES in 1989. How can that be? We didn't get both of them the same year. So I'm thinking now that we got our NES, I've never been 100% sure what year we got our Nintendo. Like I said, we got it later than everyone else in our friend groups. So now I'm thinking we got it in 1988, so like the Christmas of 1988, which to me still doesn't really make sense because I remember one of the first games we got for the console was Gremlins 2, and that came out in 1990. But my memory just must be completely off when it comes to these things. But I do specifically recall my brother and I each getting a Game Boy for Christmas the year it came out. And the weird thing about the Game Boy was that my brother and I really didn't have any interest in it. None of my friends really had any interest in it. Nobody had one, as far as I remember. And I think it was because any of the kids that were going to get them that year were going to get them at Christmas time because, like I said, it came out during that summer. So, my brother and I, Christmas morning, we get these Game Boys, and we're like, oh, okay. I didn't expect this because I'm now remembering, I'm like, okay, we must have gotten our NES the year before. So getting another console, even though it is a handheld console, so soon after getting the NES, after our parents made such a fuss about not wanting to get us an NES because we had an Atari 2600 and we didn't need to have another console in the house, that they would buy us another one so soon after the last one. So, it's weird. My memory is still kind of shady. I got to talk to my brother. I'm going to be seeing him in a few weeks. I need to talk to him about, what he remembers, because, I always thought it was 1989, and it must have been I always thought it was 1989. It must have been 1988. And then, 2 years later, hope you had dinner. Yes, I did. I actually did have food today. Work was not that busy today, so I was actually able to go out, and I had me some Raising Cane's. Deep fried food for the fat guy. That's exactly what I need to lose weight. But it was goddamn delicious. They still need to get some frickin' barbecue sauce up in that joint, though. But yeah, so 1989 Christmas, my brother and I get Game Boys, one for each of us, which is another thing that completely shocked us both. Our parents were so cheap when it came to this kind of stuff that they forked up $100 for each of these presents. And on top of that, got us a PXL 2000 that year. PXL 2000 was a video camera by Fisher-Price that ran on high bias audio tapes. It only filmed in black and white, but my brother and I were always into talking about wanting to make movies and stuff. So my parents bought this $200 camera for us and these, they spent $200 on 2 Game Boys for us. It was the weirdest Christmas. I remember we didn't, whose parents are these? What? Where did all this come from? What happened? I don't know if my dad got a raise that year or whatever, but it was cool. We had a great Christmas. And then, like, since my brother and I really didn't have any interest in the Game Boy prior to getting them, once we started playing them, my brother and I were like, this is kind of rad. I mean, even though Super Mario Land is like, doesn't look anything like the NES version of any of the Mario Brother games, doesn't really play like them either with shooter levels and stuff, and Tetris was really simple, we ended up getting a game each on top of the Tetris that the console came with. We got, my brother got Super Mario Land, and I got Alleyway. And when I started playing Alleyway, I was like, this is why I didn't want this console, because it's like, you know, you got you got the regular Nintendo, the NES out there, and you're playing stuff on there like Mario 2, Mario 3, all these other rad games, and I'm playing freaking a Breakout clone on this stupid thing, and I was really pissed. And my parents were kind of like, okay, we didn't know what kind of game it was. We just bought it because it was there. And granted, it was within the first 6 months of the console coming out. There wasn't a whole lot of games out there to choose from just yet. So my parents were like, okay, cool, we'll take you guys out, you know, after the Christmas return rush is over, and we'll get you each another game. Because they were pretty cheap, if I remember correctly. They were like $30 or something like that. So I ended up getting Revenge of the Gator, which is a digital pinball game, and I say that is one of the games that got me into playing digital pinball games. And my brother got something else. Might have been Batman. I think. Maybe Batman. But whatever, like after that, we started collecting games. I got Fist of the North Star, and I can't. God, by the end of me owning a Game Boy, I must have had at least 40 games because I was trading them with friends and, you know, getting on discount also along with the NES games. And then I got a job at Kmart in 1991 in order to get a Super Nintendo, and Game Boy was still a thing then. So I was buying Game Boy games when there was no Super Nintendo games I was interested in out there, you know, to spend my money on. But I thought it was a solid little system, even though it was really hard to see what was going on a lot of times unless you had perfect lighting and you didn't have any reflections on that little screen. I didn't like the color scheme. Everyone, you know, people back in the day did make fun of the fact that it looked like vomit green, you know, the color of the screen and all that. But like the battery life was really good. I used to take it on trips all the time and play it, like going to Ohio and back to visit our family and all that. I remember I used to play it all the way there and all the way back. And I even got like a little light thing that you could attach to the top of it to illuminate it in the dark. But yeah, it got a lot of play in my house. I remember I even brought it on a school trip. My Italian class in high school, our teacher took us to Little Italy in Chicago, and my mother volunteered to be one of like the drivers since we had a minivan and my mom wasn't working at the time. And I remember I brought it with us during the trip, and I was sitting in the front seat, and I didn't realize because it was summer. It was almost summertime, and it was so hot in the car that every time we would get back in the car to go somewhere else, I would turn the Game Boy on, and all I would see were lines going up and down the screen because the heat was like damaging the Game Boy, and I didn't realize. I'm like, did I just break it? But no. So when I got back into collecting in 2013, like I always say, one of my goals was to start getting the games that I had originally for the console and reclaim them for my current collection. And that's proving to not be very easy because finding these things in the box is kind of tough because me, just like everyone else back in the day, threw the boxes away because they were so small and dainty. But finding them in the box is tough. Finding them with the original insert is tough. Finding the manuals is kind of tough. But worse is finding those stupid little snap cases that the games came in, the little protective snap cases. I find that the hardest thing to get. And plus, a lot of the games that I had back in the day were the really popular ones, and nowadays they go for a lot of money. Like, I bought Ninja Gaiden Shadow at the Kmart I worked at for like $20 back then. Now it's like this super expensive game. To even loose, it's super expensive. I'm not willing to spend that kind of money on it. I had Kid Icarus of Myths and Monsters, which I absolutely loved, and I got that for I think $10 on sale at the Kmart I worked at. And that's another super expensive game that I will not be able to afford. I can only play it like if I emulate it or something. I technically should have more Game Boy games in my collection, but like I said, they're hard to find in good shape, complete, and for decent prices, especially nowadays with like the COVID prices, the way everything is. Need a little drink. But I do have a decent amount of stuff here. A lot more stuff that I had quality-wise than when I was a kid, because I was buying pretty much anything that I found that I thought was mildly interesting that was on clearance. So let's get into it. The older games, yeah. I never was the original Game Boy able to play Japanese games and UK games and stuff like that. I never knew if it was actually region free or not. But then again, that kind of thing wasn't even on my mind when I was a kid. So like the Game Boy came out in Christmas of 80, or sorry, the summer of 89. So I was in 8th grade. So like that kind of thing was not something I was even thinking about. Yeah, it was. Okay, well, that's good to know. I know that my Game Boy Color is because I do own an import game from Japan, and that definitely does work on it. It is region free, so that's good to know. I can start buying some of these shits cheaper, maybe. I do not actually own a Game Boy currently. I would really like to. I would definitely like to get it modded with the light in the behind the screen and get the screen color changed to something other than, pea soup colored. But if I do play a Game Boy game, I play it either one of two ways. I either play it on my Retro Freak on my television, or I play it through my Game Boy adapter for the GameCube. So, I mean, I can play them, even though I don't have the actual hardware. Like I said, I would like to get one, but haven't been able to find one that's actually in good condition that works. And I don't really have any peripherals for it either. I do have Game Boys for the other lines of Game Boy, but I don't have an actual original Game Boy. I'm using the quotes thing too much. JP Solomon Quest and JP Darius. Oh, nice. Yeah, now that I know, I can start looking into that stuff. So let's get into the games I do have. I put this one on my list of games I was looking for at the Midwest Gaming Classic, I think in 2018, the first year that it was at the Milwaukee Convention Center. And I didn't find one. I made a video about like 5 games I'm looking for at the con that year. I didn't find any of them. Well, no, I take that back. I found one of them, but I was not willing to pay the price. And the other one was found by other people, and they let me know that it was there. And when I went to go and get it, it was gone. But the one that I was really looking forward to finding the most was this one. It's a licensed game, of course, because it's me. And I love the movie that this game is based on. But it's so different from the other versions of the game that were released that I was like super excited to find a copy so I could try it out and see what it was all about. Couldn't find it for the life of me. Found copies of it on eBay that were complete, and just like there was one guy who had it. It was like $40 complete, and I put it on my wish list or my want list or watch list or whatever it was. And I was like, I'll get it next week. And then like the next week would come, and I'd be like, no, I'll get it next week. And I put it off too long, and then the guy got like, I don't know if the guy looked into it that was selling it, and all of a sudden it went from like $40 to 110. And I was like, no. So I kind of said I'm not getting it anytime soon. And then one day it was like 2 a.m. and I was bored out of my skull, and I go on eBay and I start like searching for games I've been looking for, and I found it for like $30. Some guy did not know what he had. I bet you $10 he went and like raided his old games closet at his parents' house and was like, I just put these things up for sale. And I'm talking about Alien 3 on the Game Boy. So there is Alien 3 on the Genesis and Alien 3 on the Super Nintendo. They are based on the same movie, but they are 2 totally different games. The point of the Genesis one is to rescue all the cocooned prisoners and kill all the aliens that are coming after you. And in Alien 3 on the Super Nintendo, it's more of an adventure game. You get like missions you have to accomplish. Like, oh, there's a pipe that's burst over in this one area. Go over there and seal it. Or there's too many eggs. There's eggs in this one area over here. You need to go and destroy them all. And it was like really cool mission-based scenarios. And then there was this one, which is like a Legend of Zelda top-down adventure game. And it is the weirdest thing. All the other consoles got ports of the Genesis version. The Super Nintendo one is the only one that is like that. The Game Boy version is the only one that is like this. So you can kind of see it on the back. I don't know. Their pictures are really tiny. But it is a top-down adventure game where you're playing as Ripley, and you're running around the prison, and there's aliens all over the place, just like in the movie. And the whole point is there's a queen running around. You need to find it, and you need to push it into the lead works from the film. And none of these games end like the movie. None of these games follow the rules established by the movie either, where it's Ripley, she's got a queen inside of her, and there's one alien loose in this place full of like prisoners, this like prison. And in the games, it's like, how does that translate well? Well, you just make a whole bunch of aliens out there, and there's no weapons available in this place either. So you have the place overrun by aliens, and you give Ripley every weapon you've ever seen in an alien movie. Whatevs. But the game is actually really fun. It's difficult and a little vague at times what the objectives are, but it is so different and so cool that I couldn't help but enjoy it. And yes, this is an LJN joint. I don't give a crap. They don't make these games. They just license it and pawn it off for someone else to make, and they sell it. It's actually pretty cool. It's a lot better than like the Sega Game Gear version, which is itself a port of the Genesis game, but it's not the greatest either. It's better than most. How about that? But I like it a lot. And I need to find some place to put these. How about right here? So this can go right like that. All right. Next up, we have the game that I got for Christmas that year with the Game Boy, and that's Alleyway. And like I said, it is a breakout clone done by Nintendo. So you have a little paddle at the bottom of the screen, you're bouncing a ball around, and you're trying to break blocks at the top of the screen, break all the blocks, move on to the next one, and the blocks look different or in different configurations each stage. And then eventually you will get to one that is themed like Mario. Big whoop-de-frickin-do. Like I said, I was not happy. I was like, we have 3 versions of this game right now on the Atari 2600. I can play it on the go now. Yay. I was not a fan of it either. Like I said, I'm thinking of getting rid of my breakout game for the Atari 2600 that I do have. So yeah, not thrilled about it, but it was nostalgic because even though I was not happy that this was the game I got, doesn't mean I didn't play it to death. Like back in the day, you played what you had. Like I didn't have a job when this came out. I had to make do with what I had. So even though I was kind of ticked off that this was one of the games I got, I played the crap out of it. So, yeah. In between classes, yeah, like as an adult now, I appreciate it more. But back then, I was like, I played those games to death on the Atari 2600. I did not want to play it on the go. I wanted to play things I hadn't played before. So, yeah. Oh, you're going to keep an eye out for... Oh, that'd be great if you could. Let me know if you see one for cheap. That's actually in good condition. Next up, we have another game that... This is actually a game that I wanted, and I never got it. I wanted it because it's very similar to a Nintendo game that I really like. And I'm talking Altered Space. It is an isometric action-adventure game that is like playing Solstice on the NES. And in fact, it looks and plays almost exactly like Solstice, except this one is science fiction instead of fantasy. And it's really fun. I like these types of isometric action games. They really started on the, the ZX Spectrum. A lot of the games that Rare was making for that console back in the day were these isometric action games. And like a couple of companies, I'm assuming whoever developed this is the same people that developed Solstice. They're both released by Sony ImageSoft. Probably were either people that worked for Rare and worked on those games or really big fans of those types of games because it feels just like those. And I have played those games on the Rare Replay for the Xbox One, so I know what I'm talking about on this matter. So, yeah, it's really fun. Never had this back in the day. Never could find it for a decent price, so I never bought it until now. And I did pay a little bit more than I wanted for it, but I didn't care because it's actually worth the money. Sure, I'll let you know, bruh. And thank you. Here's one developed by Rare, released by LJN, but developed by Rare. And that is... Oh, no, this one isn't developed by Rare. This one's developed by Bits, I think. I think the sequel's the one that's made by Rare. Whatever. Amazing Spider-Man. This is one of the games I had as a kid for the Game Boy. And even though it is not perfect, it is actually a lot of fun. I remember having a blast playing it, even though sometimes I would get really frustrated with the way, like, there was... I always felt it was kind of laggy at times. Like, you would try to do a jump or something, and it would just happen a little bit too late, or you try to shoot the web, and it just wouldn't happen right away. But I really enjoyed it. And when I picked this up off of eBay, I was playing it for a good long while, and I was like, it plays just like I remember, and it's just as fun as I remember it being. It's not bad. I've never actually played any of the sequels that came out for the Game Boy. There's 2 more. And like I said, I don't think this is the one developed by Rare. I think Rare did part 2 and maybe part 3. I think, like I said, I think this one was developed by Bits. If my eyes only worked, I would be able to tell you if it says so on the back of the box. Yeah, I can't. But that one, I think, holds up. And then there's this. This is a game everyone had on the Game Boy that I knew that had a Game Boy. It was weird because, like I said, my brother and I weren't really interested in the Game Boy at all. None of my friends really were too, or really were either. Like, I don't remember any of them really talking about it. And then we got them, and then all of a sudden everybody got them. But like I said, I think the reason no one had them back when they first came out was because the parents were like, oh, we're going to give them to the kids for Christmas. And everyone just happened to get them at the same time we did. Because I remember this was one of the first games we got for the console, and I played the crap out of this. It is so good. It's a platformer at times, and at other times it's a shmup. You're playing as Batman, but for some reason you're using a gun. Batman does not use guns, but in this you are. And it's you're jumping around on blocks, and there's different colored blocks. There's like white ones you can just destroy if they're in your way, and there's black blocks. When you destroy a black box, there's a power up there, and you can get different types of guns. You get health regen power ups. One will depower your gun, and it'll have like a very small shoot distance. And then there's like these batarangs that you can throw, and you can throw multiple ones at a time. And then there's like shmup levels where you're in the Batwing and you're taking out other, I think it was helicopters and the balloons from the film, if I remember correctly. The music is absolutely fantastic. It looks pretty good, even though Batman is like this teeny tiny little sprite. Doesn't matter. I was playing this probably a month ago. I think it was right after I beat Kirby. I was playing some of this, and I was like, this is still fun. Like, after all these years, this is still pretty awesome. And the music is super catchy, like I said. So Sunsoft could do no wrong back in those days. Next up is definitely a Rare joint. This is the game Rare is the most well-known for. Not this version of it, but the one on the NES, and that's Battletoads. So one of my goals is to get all of the games developed by Rare for all the consoles, not the microcomputers, but the consoles and stuff that we have available here, maybe some of the import ones too. And I never had this back in the day. I think I saw it like when it first came out, but it was one of those games that like disappeared and I never really saw again unless I was maybe at a Funko-Land. But due to the difficulty of the Nintendo Battletoads, this was not really high up on my list. And plus, I wasn't really doing the whole Rare thing back then either. But I was watching, what was it, T-Belly was streaming. He was like trying to no death run Battletoads. And when he finally did, he moved on to this. And I was like, oh, I've never actually seen anybody play the Game Boy one before. I don't even know what it looks like. Is it just a port of the NES game? So I was watching him stream it, and I was like, no, this is nothing like the Nintendo one. I mean, it plays the same way, but it's not like a remake or a port. It's its own thing. It has levels that are very similar to like some of them, but there's like shmup levels where you're inside a ship and you're like shooting at other spaceships and stuff. But it's still a platformer, just like the original one with a beat 'em up aspect too. And it's fun. It's hard. It is difficult, but it's not bad. And I was super thrilled that I was able to find a copy of this in the box that's still in great shape. I need to get a protector for this. But yeah, gotta have that. Absolutely. This one I found because why not? I had to piece this together. So this is a Bubble Ghost by FCI. I knew zero about this game when I found it. So my friends and I, before the COVID, used to go to Milwaukee because Half Price Books has like a warehouse out there. And once a year, they would have like this warehouse sale where everything in the building was $1. And it was like all their overstock stuff that wasn't selling. They were sent back to this warehouse to rot. And they're just trying to get all this product out of there. So we would go there every year and raid the place. I would raid it for video games and movies, and my friends would raid it for books and sometimes music. So turns out the first year that we went out there, my friends were like, oh, there's a whole bunch of, why is there a Wi-Fi signal thing happening here? I don't know what the hell that's about. Okay. Where I lost my train of thought. They found out there was a couple of half-price books in the area, and we went and checked them out. And I found the cartridge and the manual at this half-price books for like $15, $20. And I was like, and it had the case. It had the snap case on it too. And I was like, oh, sweet. I've never heard of that game. Let me take a look at it. So I looked up some footage on YouTube while I was there. And I was like, sure, for this price, I'm sure I could find a box. And sure enough, on the way back from Milwaukee to Chicago, I found a box, just the box, on eBay and bought that for another $20. So this whole thing cost me like less than $40, I think, to put together. And what it is a puzzle game that reminds me a little bit of like Bubble Bobble. I haven't played it a whole lot, but it looked fun in the video that I watched on YouTube, and I booted it up when I got home to make sure that it actually worked, and it did. So I always figured I'd get back to it, and I just haven't yet. Maybe I'll boot it up this weekend or something and give it a shot. But I hear good things about it, so why not? This is one of the first games we got for the Game Boy back in the day, and that is the Castlevania Adventure. Everyone has a problem with this game because it's slow-paced. For me as a kid who was not very good at video, like I loved video games, but just was not very good at them, I found that to be a blessing. I was like, yes, the slower pace makes it easier for me to get around and avoid getting hit by things. Yeah, some of the jumps in this game are like satanic in the way that they require absolute precision. But I had a blast with this one. I thought the music was great. I liked the gameplay and all that. As an adult playing it now, I'm like, yeah, this is a little tedious, but it's still Castlevania. It feels like Castlevania. So I can't really complain. But I think it's pretty dang good for the first version of a handheld Castlevania game that wasn't one of those Tiger handheld bullshits that we used to have when I was a kid. So this was always fun to me. I did actually have, back when I was collecting in the late 90s, early 2000s, Part 2 and the Castlevania, what was it, the Legacy, the third game for the Game Boy. And those are great. Those are really, really good. But I sold them for like pennies when I lost my job because I'm a dope. I need to shift because I'm slipping out of my damn chair. There we go. Next up is, got this at Freak Toys. I want to say this was last summer. I went to visit Ryan Rocket Sauce from the Cartridge Club out in Milwaukee, and he took me to Freak Toys for the first time, and I loved it. I lost my freaking mind there. I also sold them like a shitload of toys that I had been collecting like in the 80s and 90s and maybe early 2000s. And it got like almost $600 in credit at a place. And I was just like looking for ways to spend it there. And I picked up a copy of Donkey Kong Land 2. And I have never actually played this game before this, but it's a rare joint. So I absolutely had to have it. This one can be played on the Super Game Boy and partially in color. I hear this one isn't that great though. I think Captain Algebra streamed this not too long ago, and he's just like, "Yeah, it's not that great. It's not the greatest. It's nothing like the original Donkey Kong Country 2." But it's a platformer with the pre-rendered graphics, the Silicon graphics, Killer Instinct, that kind of thing. But whatever. I didn't care. I got it for really cheap there too, which is why I picked it up. And then we have another staple for the Game Boy, and that's Dr. Mario. Puzzle game. I want to say it came out for the Game Boy first, and then it came out for the NES a little bit later. But yeah, this one is in black and white, or green and white, or whatever you want to call it. But instead of stacking like configurations of blocks together to make lines that'll disappear, you're matching up the colors of the pills. And a pill has like a color on one side and a different color on the second side. And this one you're matching black, gray, and white sides of the pills together to make them go away and kill these germs that are like in different sections of the screen. You need to match them up to the color that they are to make them go away. Really simple puzzle game. Really fun. I mean, I prefer it on the Nintendo because it's in color. But I remember a friend of mine, my friend Gary, that I was talking about all the time in the Nintendo streams, he had that version of the game. And I remember that was the first time I played it was at his house. The nice thing about the Game Boy was that when I would get invited to my friend Gary's house, he couldn't say, "Hey, you want to come over and watch me beat so-and-so game on the Game Boy?" Because what am I going to do? Like stare over his shoulder the whole time like this and be like, "Oh, that's cool." There was no way to play it on your television. So we actually had to find other things to do. And that was when the two of us got into like drawing and drawing our own comic books and stuff. It's just kind of funny. Because we couldn't really, like, if it wasn't a Nintendo game, because he didn't have a Genesis. He had a Nintendo, then he got a Super Nintendo, and he had a Game Boy. So yeah, I think that was the point where we were like, well, we have to find something else to do since I'm not going to stand there and watch you play this little tiny little screen that I can't see. So one of the other first games I got for the Game Boy was Fist of the North Star. 10 big brawls for the king of the universe. That's not what this game is about. There is no fate of the universe in the balance. It's basically like who's the biggest, who could be the biggest punching bag. At the time that this came out, I had just recently gotten into the manga of Fist of the North Star, a.k.a. Hokuto no Ken in Japan, which is this really cool post-apocalyptic martial arts manga series that's ultra-violent. And I was reading the mangas, and I was like really into them. And then the movie, I found out there was a movie, and I was like, holy shit, like I need to see this. And that movie blew my mind. The game, on the other hand, is not the greatest. This is made by the same people who made the games on the NES. What is it, Culture Brain or Electro Brain? And the first two NES games are not that great because they're really kind of hastily thrown together. At least I feel that way. Platform beat 'em up kind of games. And this one is like more of a one-on-one fighting game, but playing it on that tiny little screen does this game no favors because the characters aren't that big. You can see how big they are there, and sometimes they just blend into the backgrounds, and it's hard to see what's going on. The hitboxes and the moves that you can do are very limited. I think some characters can throw like a fireball kind of thing, but most of the time you're just jumping around trying not to get hit and maybe squeeze in a punch now and then. But the first few fights are pretty easy, but then once you get to Rao and some of the later characters, it is like, god damn. Not the greatest game in this series, but it's still Fist of the North Star. No exploding heads or entrails shooting out people's buttholes, but it's cool, but it's not awesome in any way. But it's Fist of the North Star, so it's cool to me because I want all the Fist of the North Star things. Here's another game I wanted back in the day, but I never was able to get a copy for my own, and that is Fortified Zone, and this one is from Jalico. And I always wanted this one because even though I was not a big fan of the NES game that this is kind of copying, it's like playing Metal Gear, the original Metal Gear on the NES. It is a top-down military, espionage adventure style game, and you can definitely see the Metal Gear inspiration in this game. It is it's slapping you right in the face. But you can play as two different characters, if I remember correctly. And when I played it, when it showed up in the mail, when I got this off of eBay, relatively inexpensive compared to some of the other versions or copies of this I was seeing at the same time. That was my superpower for a good 6 years, was going on eBay and just finding those people who were slipping. But it's not a thing for me anymore. It has not happened in the longest time. I played it just for a little while to make sure the cart worked, and it worked fine. And I was like, okay. And you know what? It's just as hard as Metal Gear, but I honestly think it's a lot better than the original Metal Gear on the NES. What's up, VGM? How's it going? Thank you. Got this off of the limited run games. I have a bunch of other ones in the other room too. Next up is a game that I definitely need to play through. I think this is going to be the next game that I attempt to play through, and that is Gargoyle's Quest. This is the spinoff of the Ghosts and Goblins games, or Ghouls and Ghosts, or whatever you want to call it. I always had to laugh. The reason I never bought this back in the day is because when I looked at the back of the box when I'd be at the store looking for a new game, and I recognized the character that you're playing as, and I was like, that's that asshole who was always kicking my ass in Ghosts and Goblins on the NES. Why would I want to play as that schmuck? So I never bought it. I was like, I don't want to play a game about that asshole. The hell with it. But turned out it was actually a pretty decent game, and it's way better than that NES game that it's spinning off from. But it's a side-scrolling platformer where you're playing as Firebrand, that red demon that was always jumping around and swooping down at you in Ghosts and Goblins. And it's really, really cool. I was playing this. When it first showed up, I was attempting to beat it, but I just couldn't get that far in it. I need to sit down and really dedicate time to it because I was playing Demon's Crest not too long ago, which is the third game in this series, and I was like, I need to play all these in a row. I cannot play any more of this game. I need to do 1, 2, and then 3, which I do own all 3. And for some reason, the version that I bought, some kid wrote a code on here. I have not tried it out to see what it does, but feel free to give it a shot if you have it. Take a screen cap or whatever. So, great game. I just need to dedicate more time to it. Metabots? Not sure what that is. Over a year and a half, you're still waiting your Scott Pilgrim. What? I got mine so long ago, and a lot of my friends that ordered that special edition got theirs. You might want to give them an email or something and ask what the hell's going on. Yeah, I know a bunch of people that ordered that special limited edition or whatever the hell it was. Because I have the one that came in the Genesis case. That showed up a long time ago. Next up is Gremlins 2. Had the NES game, absolutely had to get the Game Boy one back in the day. And it is nothing like it. The Nintendo game is a top-down Legend of Zelda style action-adventure game. This one is a side-scrolling platformer and is hard as balls. I remember playing this in my study hall in my freshman year of high school and getting my ass handed to me and actually getting kicked out of study hall for cursing at my Game Boy. But yeah, you play as Gizmo and you're going around killing all the different gremlins and characters like that. And the weapons you have are stupid. Like you start off with like a pencil and that's what you're supposed to like hit the enemies with. But the thing is, the reach of it is so short. It's just slightly outside your character's hitbox. And you basically need to be dry humping an enemy in order to hit it. And you're guaranteed basically to take a hit yourself pretty much every time you want to hit something. So it's just better to avoid everything. You get like tomatoes you can throw later on, like in the NES game. You can hide in these toolboxes that make you invincible for a short period of time. There's like a gun that you get that shoots like a boxing glove out, like a Looney Tunes cartoon style kind of thing. But it is super hard, and like I know back in the day, Gamer like freaking hates this game. He beat it. He forced himself to beat it, and he was like, "Yeah, that was not worth the effort." But I always wanted it because not only do I love the NES game, but I had this back in the day, and I, even though it was frustrating as hell, I loved playing it because I love Gremlins as a license, and the music is pretty fantastic too. And the graphics are not bad either, and it represents the movie decently well, so I couldn't complain. That's when you start contacting the Better Business Bureau, dude. Let them know what's going on. Because I'm about the same thing happening to me with a company out here that I bought like $100 and some worth of like RPG tabletop stuff from, and they still haven't shipped it to me. And every time I send them an email asking them what's going on, they never respond. So I'm getting like this close to contacting the Better Business Bureau and getting their asses on the case. I picked this up at the Midwest Gaming Classic, I do believe in 2018. That is James Bond 007. I had no clue that this was actually released by Nintendo, but then it makes sense that Nintendo released GoldenEye also, so, But I remember I found this at Midwest Gaming Classic, just mixed amongst a bunch of other stuff at one guy's table, and I was like, I totally forgot that game existed. So I took a look at it, and I was like, what? You got like a little super deformed James Bond running around with like a tiny body and a huge head, and it looks like Metal Gear. All right, and it was dirt cheap. I think I paid like $15 for this. And yeah, it is like this player's choice version. But honestly, I have never seen a standard like the amount of times I've actually run into this since then. I've never seen anything but the player's choice version anywhere. I've never actually seen like the standard old Game Boy version with like the blue letters on the sides. So I don't know. But it can be played on the Super Game Boy, which means it's like kind of sorted in color. But yeah, I love James Bond. One of my goals is to get all the James Bond games for all the different consoles. So yeah, had to get it. Yep, order them separately. Oh, are they? Oh, is that what it is? You ordered a vinyl at the same? Yeah, there's at least 2 orders of mine that are ready to go, but there's something else in my order that I did at the same time that is holding them up. And the thing is, I think they kind of expect you to do that because otherwise you're going to be paying like double, like extra shipping for if you order everything separately. All the shipping costs are just going to be ridiculous. So I think they expect that to be the way things are purchased on their site. I definitely won't go separate for everything because that'll just be super expensive and I don't need that shit. A lot of the games actually I've been like not buying because I'm like, I'll just get it when it comes to Best Buy. Next up, we have Killer Instinct, another rare joint. Absolutely love the arcade game of Killer Instinct. And then I remember working at that video store back in the mid-90s. And then out of nowhere, Nintendo announced for the Super Nintendo, even though the Super Nintendo was almost on the way out because the Nintendo 64, I think, was just about to hit. They're like, oh, we're releasing Killer Instinct on the Super Nintendo. We're like, what? Why? Why aren't you just releasing it for the Nintendo 64? Nope, and it was actually pretty good. And then this came out because there was no other Game Boy at the time. There was just still the standard Game Boy. The color didn't come out until like what? 1997 or 8 or something like that. And this came out in 89. The original came out in 89. So this was not on my radar. I was just like, I didn't really want this Super Nintendo version. I'm like, I'll just wait because I knew that Killer Instinct Gold was coming out for the 64. And I was like, I'll just wait for that. So the only way I played Killer Instinct was either at a friend's house, my friend Charlie had it, or I played it at the video store that I worked at because we had a rental copy. But this version, I was like, there is no way in hell that game is going to work on the freaking Game Boy. But the weird thing is, it kind of does. So when I got back into collecting, I'm like, I want all the rare things, had to get this. Picked up a copy of it, and when I booted it up the first time, like, this is going to be like that Mortal Kombat 4 on the Game Boy Color. This is going to be a complete shit show. And I was playing it, and it's not perfect. It's not great, but it's fun enough for a Game Boy one-on-one fighting game. It definitely beats a lot of the Mortal Kombat games we got on the Game Boy. They really tried their hardest to make the characters look like their arcade versions. It doesn't look anything like the arcade comparatively, but it's one of the better fighting games I've played on the Game Boy. Not a lot of them work. This one's probably the only one that really kind of does and is actually kind of fun. So I recommend that if you're looking for a one-on-one fighting game to play on the Game Boy. Granted, I've never actually played it on a Game Boy. It could be a completely different experience looking at it on that little screen, but playing it on my television is fine. I get everything as it's ready. Yeah. I just beat this game like 2 weeks ago. This is my current Backlog Roulette game. I'm on a podcast with my buddy Jason from Corpse Flood Gaming, if you're not already in the know. It's called the Super Enabler Brothers Show, and it's on his channel. So if you're interested in checking it out, it's a video podcast. It's called his channel is called Corpse Flood Gaming, and we're on like episode 30 something, I think now. And at the end of every episode, Jason has a roulette wheel. Each of us has a list of games that each one has a number attached to it that corresponds with the number on that roulette wheel. He spins the wheel at the end of the show. Whatever number the ball lands on, we play the corresponding game on our list. And this was the current game that I had from the last episode we filmed. And that is Kirby's Dream Land. I picked this up at, I think it was the Make Sense Variety Store in Milwaukee. I went there during, I think it was 2018's Midwest Gaming Classic. I got to my hotel a little too early that day. I expected there to be more traffic, and I got there like way sooner than any of my friends. And to waste some time, I decided, I'm like, well, while I'm here, since the con isn't happening on a Friday, it starts on Saturday, and then none of my friends from out of state are going to be here for another 3 hours, I'll go to the Make Sense Variety Store and look around, see if there's anything. And I found a ton of stuff there, including this. And this was $20, complete in the box. I made them open it up and everything. So I was like, there's no way I'm passing that up because I'm guaranteeing I'm going to find this for double that price at the convention. So I played through this 2 weekends ago, and I beat it on my first sitting. I had never played this game before, aside from testing it out when I brought it home to make sure it worked, and then I put it on the shelf. The first time I actually made an effort to play it, I beat it through on my first sitting. I think I continued once because I was getting used to the controls and I kept dying. But like the only time I really had any like problems with it was when I got to King Dedede at the end, trying to figure out exactly what you can use against him to damage him. Took like a minute or two for me to realize. I'm like, oh, every time he hits the ground, those like stars kick up, and I have to suck one of those in and throw it back at him. Okay, I got it. And then I beat the game. And turns out there's like a second playthrough you're supposed to do to get the real ending. But I was like, no, I'm okay. I beat it the one time. I'm good. I might go back and play through the second playthrough also. But super fun platformer. First game featuring Kirby, the little fluff ball that sucks his enemies into his mouth and then spits them back out at the enemies to kill them. It's super simple, super short. Like I said, I beat this on my first playthrough in about 30 minutes. I even did a review of this in a short on my channel. I think I released that one last Friday. And I had a good time with it. It's fun. And I played this on my Retro Freak in black and white and not green and vomit. And it's really fun. I actually want to get the sequels now. Yeah, of the Mortal Kombat games that were released on the Game Boy, Part 2 is probably my favorite one because, number one, that's my favorite Mortal Kombat game. But yeah, that one doesn't totally suck, but like Part 1, and I don't remember, is there a Part 3? I can't be positive. I have 1 and 2. Part 1 is not good. Part 2 is actually not terrible. It's bad, but it's not like awful. But Killer Instinct is probably the best one-on-one fighting game that I've played on the Game Boy. But yeah, super fun game. I want to get the sequel. If I can find it somewhere, I'd be down. Totally down. Next up is a puzzle game that I had back in the day. It was one of the first games we got. I think maybe we didn't get Batman. I think it might have been I got Revenge of the Gator and my brother got this. It's Quirk. He's amazing. Jokes. It's a puzzle game where it's like environmental puzzles. You're stuck in like a level and you need to go from one end to the other. And there's boxes that you need to move. And there's like these turnstiles that you need to turn specific ways to make a path that you can get through. How many levels are there? Does it actually say? Nope, doesn't say how many stages. Puzzle your way through hundreds of tricky predicaments, so it could be a lot. Yeah, but it's really fun. You play as this little tomato with a mohawk. He's got that 90s tude, or late 80s, early 90s tude. And you're trying to bang a tomato that's hanging out in the background. You're trying to rescue her. It's fun. It does get on my nerves after a while. Like, there's only so much of this game I can take. But the weird thing is, I can't remember if there's like a password. I think there might be a password that you can use in this. But like, it's really nice to have a save state nowadays, so I don't have to play through the same stages over and over again to try to beat it. But it's still fun. It's just, like I said, I can only play it in short little increments because it just starts to get on my nerves after a while. And then always like coming back at it like a month later with a fresh set of eyes reinvigorates me for like another good 30 levels or whatever like that. And then I get sick of it again and then got to put it down and play something else and come back later. They saved a lot of money on that joke. Street Fighter Alpha on Game Boy Color is pretty good. I've never actually played that. I'm going to have to check that out. Now, as a classic, I have a controversial opinion on this one that doesn't really go with the flow, but especially when the way I think of this franchise, this is probably my least favorite game in the franchise, and that's Metroid 2: Return of Samus. Was not a real big fan of the original game on the NES. My friend Pat had it. I played it a little bit at his house. Didn't get it. Eventually played it. I got a copy of my own. Played it. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then part 2 came out, and I bought this when I was working at Kmart. This came out while I was there. And I was like, oh, cool. There's a sequel. That'll be pretty fun. And I played it, and it was almost exactly like playing the NES game. But playing this on the Game Boy screen was a nightmare. I could not see what the hell I was doing half the time. I couldn't tell what was going on. So, like, I really was like, fuck that game. Like, the hell with it. I'm not playing that. And everyone that was telling me, like, oh, the game's really good, I was like, no, I don't like it at all. You can go to hell. So I've never really enjoyed this game. From what I understand, it has some cool twists in the storyline, like with Samus basically getting like a baby Metroid imprinted on her and all that kind of thing, and that's played off in Super Metroid. But like, I just could not get into it because I couldn't see what I was doing. I couldn't tell what was going on half the time. So I never liked it. The remake, on the other hand, that came out for the 3DS, I thought was fantastic. Was it Samus's Return or whatever it is, or Samus Returns? That is fantastic. I love that way more than this one. I just could not do it. I don't know why, but I had to have it because I wanted to have the entire Metroid collection, and I do. Until Metroid Prime 4 comes out, I have every Metroid game ever made. Even the foreign ones, even the ones that came out in Japan only. But yeah, there's that. What's up, Risky? How's it going? Thank you. We are not friends anymore. I still like it for being a Metroid game. It's just not my favorite. I mean, a lot of people complain about Other M on the Wii, but I don't hate that one. I'd never really go back to play that one at all. Maybe I'll try it again on the Retro Freak. Now that I'll be able to see what I'm doing, maybe my opinion will change on it. But then again, this opinion is basically from 1991. I haven't really played it since. Your fave is Other M? Yeah, that one I don't hate. Everyone seems to hate on it, but I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it's great, but it's not terrible. Try another Metroid 2 remake. I don't have a computer to run that on. I have a Mac, and it does not work on here. Next up we have Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Also picked this up at Freak Toys in Sheboygan last summer when I went to out there with Rocket Sauce from the Cartridge Club for my birthday. And I still honestly couldn't tell you what this is. I think this is a one-on-one fighting game because these games confuse the hell out of me. They jump back and forth from being a one-on-one fighting game or a beat-em-up. Like, you would think that because the Super Nintendo one is a beat-em-up, that the Game Boy won't be a beat-em-up too. No, this is a one-on-one fighting game. And then the Genesis one is a one-on-one fighting game also. But then when you got the movie games, they alternate too. There's like a Super Nintendo one I think is a one-on-one fighting game. And then the Genesis one is a beat 'em up. It's like, what? Make up your minds what these are going to be. It's not bad, but I picked it up because it was cheap. I'm not a huge Power Rangers fan. Like when Power Rangers were a thing, I was way too old to be into it. So it's kind of like past me. But the games are fun usually, and I buy the games because they're fun, and I like licensed games. So there's that. It's the good Metroid 2. The modern remake is okay, but I hate the pairing thing. Yeah, I know Nintendo, my buddy Nintendo, if you know him, go and follow him on YouTube also. Him and I talk about the Metroid games a lot, and he loves Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. It was like he said it's like his favorite Game Boy game of all time. And he didn't like the parrying thing in Samus Returns. But on the flip side, I'm the opposite. I love the parrying thing. I thought it gave it a new angle that wasn't there in the original, and don't really like the Game Boy one. But like I said, I haven't played the Game Boy one in the longest time, like decades, so I need to try it again. Next up we're just talking about this. Mortal Kombat 2 on the Game Boy. I had the original Mortal Kombat on the Game Boy back in the day. I had all the Mortal Kombat things back then. I haven't been able to find a copy for my collection, but definitely had to get a copy of Mortal Kombat 2, which is my all-time favorite fighting game still. And like VGM was saying, it's not the greatest. It's definitely not. But for a Mortal Kombat game on the Game Boy, it's actually not too bad. Yeah, there's some characters missing, but they really tried with this one because, like I said, the one for the original Game Boy for the first game was not good. But this one, it was like they really tried to squeeze as much into the game as they possibly could. It's not completely successful. The controls are a little weird. It looks kind of weird. It's actually better on the Game Gear. But for, like I say, an attempt to make a Mortal Kombat game work on the Game Boy, it's not bad. With 2 buttons and this tiny little screen that gets all blurry when things move fast, it kind of works and it kind of doesn't. It's not the greatest. But it's still Mortal Kombat. I think I need to get a box upgrade because I didn't realize when I bought this off of eBay that it had like that tab stuck to the box. I tried to get it off, but it was going to start tearing the paint off or the color off the front label. And I can't have that, so I might try to find a replacement box for that at some point. When I emulated pairing with a controller wasn't bad. My hands are too fat to do it well in the handhelds. I got you. This is another one of the original games I had for my Game Boy. Man, I need a drink. That is Motocross Maniacs. So, my parents bought this for me because at the time that this came out, I was like I said, I just gotten my Nintendo and I was enjoying playing Excite Bike just a little too much. So my parents looked at the back of this and they're like, "Oh, that's probably just like Excite Bike." It's not. I mean, it's similar, but it's like more like trick racing, like you're doing loop-de-loops and all kinds of crazy shit. It's fun. I definitely enjoy it now more than I did back then. Back then, I was like, I don't want a stupid racing game. I want a game where I'm killing people kind of thing. I want an adventure action game or something like where I shoot guns or I'm beating people up or whatever. I don't want some motorcycle racing game. Like, I don't like motorcycles. I don't want any of that crap. I don't watch motocross. What do I want this for? But nowadays I play it and I'm like, it's actually pretty fun. They actually got a sequel on the Game Boy Advance, which I don't think is nearly as good as this one. But it's super fun now for me. So I get it. Can't really complain. This is another one that I had back in the day. I think I convinced my grandmother to buy this one for me. And that is Nemesis. So I was like, I really want a shooter because I had another shooter or shmup. I had one that I will talk about later for the console. And I was like, is that as good as shooters are going to get on this damn console? Because if that's the way these are going to look, I'm not going to want to play any of them ever again. And then I saw this on the shelf, and I was like, oh, Life Force. I love Life Force. Maybe this is like Life Force. It's a Gradius game. I think this is Gradius 2. It might be. Can't be sure. But it is basically a Gradius game. It plays by the same rules. You have the little power-up bar at the bottom as you collect those icons. Sorry, I just burped. The little selection of what your power-up will start to move down the line. You get to the one that you want, select it, get an option, which is an extra little character to shoot lasers, change your weapons, be able to shoot rockets, move faster, that kind of thing. But this is a Gradius game on the Game Boy. And I was not a big fan of it. And I was another one of those things where I was like, yeah, I should have known. I was not a big fan of Gradius on the NES. I should have known that this was going to be the same thing. For some reason, like Life Force, because of like what's going on in that game, like you're inside this living creature, really like turned me on to that game. Like I was like attracted to that game. I wanted to play it all the time. But the regular Gradius game just did not do it for me at all for some reason. So I was not big on this when I got it. But as an adult, and now I'm into shmups, I'm fine with it. It's pretty cool. It does have a lot of slowdown, though, just like Gradius on the NES. But like I said, I think it's a port of Gradius 2, if I'm not mistaken. I know about Battle Unit Zeoth. I've always wanted that one, too, but it's always too expensive. Yeah, Life Force is a lot more forgiving. That might be the reason why I like that one, too. One of your greatest videos is named Nemesis. Yeah, I don't remember if it's like if I'm remembering correctly, I think Nemesis is Gradius 2. But in some territories it's called Gradius 2 and in other territories it's called Nemesis. I don't know why, but whatever. Yeah, especially with co-op. Yes, the co-op. This is a game I did not know even existed back in the day. And I was just doing some random search for Game Boy games when I was in like I got to buy all the Game Boy games moods. And I found it on eBay, and it was pretty cheap. And I love this franchise, so I was like, where did this come from? I need to own it like immediately. And like I said, it was not expensive. And that is Oddworld Adventures. I had no clue that the Oddworld was on any Nintendo console other than like I only thought it was a PlayStation thing only. So to learn years later that I got Game Boy versions, what? So I absolutely love these like cinematic platforming games like this. I played the crap out of Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exodus. So I absolutely had to have this. And it's playable on the the Super Game Boy, so there's a sort of color version of it out there. But it plays just like your standard Oddworld game. It's a cinematic platformer, kind of like Prince of Persia or Flashback or Out of This World kind of thing. And it's just as fun. It's just on a tiny little screen, but I probably would have gone crazy playing this on the Game Boy back in the day. So playing it on my TV is not the worst. So I really, really like it. And then I found out not too long after that there was a sequel for another Game Boy console. We'll talk about that later. Here's one that I had back in the day. It's called Quarth. It is another puzzle game, but the cool thing about this is a combination of a puzzle game and a shmup. So you play as this little tiny ship, and it's like a vertically scrolling shooter, and blocks keep getting in your way. And you have to keep shooting the blocks to make a path for you to get through. And it sounds weird, and it's really simple, but it's like sometimes the simplest games are the most fun. And I remember having a good time with this one. And then I totally had forgotten about this game's existence. And then I was watching one of Captain Algebra's pickup streams, and he was like, oh, I got a copy of this game called Quarth. And I was just kind of like, I remember that. Where did it go? I need a copy of that right now. And I went on eBay like the day that I saw that video, and I found a cheap-ass copy for like $10 complete in box. So not an expensive game, but pretty fun and different. I do not have the Taz game. The only Taz games I have, I think, are for the Genesis. Yeah, I had no clue that Oddworld went past the PlayStation console. So learning about it like what? 20 some years later, I was just like, what? How did I not know about this? Just shows you how much attention I was paying to the Game Boy at the time. So here is a homebrew. I learned about this because of the Game Deflators podcast. I was on an episode. One of the Game Deflators, I can't remember which guy it was not available, and they needed an emergency guest to keep the schedule going. And they asked if I was asked to be the guest. And right after I was a guest, they posted on Twitter about this new Game Boy game that they had gotten off of this Australian website. And I was like, that looked kind of cool. I should look into it. And it was not expensive. I think this was like $25 or something. And turns out it's kind of a rip on a Pokemon game, but you're playing as a cop. It's called Quest Arrest. And it's by John Rue is the name of the guy. But the company he created for this is called The Game Room Rue, I think it is. And he basically, like, from what I can tell, it looks like he took the basic code from one of the original Pokemon games and, like, changed things to make it work for a policeman game. And you can tell by looking at the battle screen right here. It's a freaking Pokemon. It is. So what it is you're playing as a cop, and you're trying to make the neighborhood better. And you do that by solving crimes and helping out people when you run into them, like you talk to them like in an RPG, and they'll be like, "Oh, help get my cat out of the tree. Go and do it." And you have like these respect points, and as you do good things, your respect goes up. And then if you're on an investigation of some sort, people will be more willing to talk to you if you have respect. If you have a lot of respect points, the less respect points you have, you'll get like a different kind of an answer. The people are less willing to talk to you about stuff. And you do that by failing missions and stuff like that. And if you get like an answer tree for like a question or whatever, and you pick the wrong answer, your respect points can go down. So when you get into a fight, it's an RPG style fight, but it's like looks like a Pokemon game. And the cool thing is, it's actually not bad. It's pretty fun. I was pleasantly surprised. And the cool thing is, like, this is a homebrew, and the guy made his own box. He made his own manuals. Yeah, the cardstock is a little thicker than your standard cardstock, but, I mean, it's in color. And the cart looks legit, so I was pleasantly surprised. And like I said, it was not expensive. So I took the advice of the Game Deflators and picked this up, and I was not sad about it. It's just weird that I have 2 games that start with Q in my Game Boy collection. Do you throw handcuffs instead of Pokeballs? No. This one I found at my local retro store, Video Games Then and Now. The guy had it in his expensive game case, but it wasn't expensive. For some reason, he was selling this dirt cheap. I think it was like $30. And I was like, damn, I remember seeing that at the Kmart that I worked at, but I never picked up a copy because I liked the original game. It's a sequel. It's Rescue of Princess Blob Bet. It's a sequel to The Boy and His Blob. I liked A Boy and His Blob, but I didn't like it enough to be like, oh, I want to play that on that tiny little screen kind of thing, so I never bought it. But seeing it as an adult, I was like, well, I've got Boy and His Blob. Might as well get the sequel. And it's more of the same. It's a puzzle platformer where you play as this kid who has a pet alien blob, and you feed him different flavored jelly beans, and each jelly bean flavor will turn him into a different tool. Like, you need to jump down a huge chasm. You don't want to fall to your death. Throw, like, I think it's an orange or a tangerine jelly bean to the blob. He turns into an umbrella, and then you can glide down like Mary Poppins. You need to get to a platform that's too high up, throw him like a coconut jelly bean or whatever, and he turns into a trampoline that you can jump on to get to the high places. You know, stuff like that. I think it's a really cool concept that just isn't pulled off. It's not pulled off completely successfully in the NES game, but I think it's better here. Or at least more fun. But like I said, not playing this on the Game Boy probably helps. Playing this on a television is the way I've been playing it. So it's not bad. It's not great, but it's fun. That's all I can ask for. Next up is another one of the games I had as a kid. I've talked about this a couple times already tonight, and that's Revenge of the Gator. Got this. I think this was like the second game I got for my Game Boy after getting it that Christmas. And it's a pinball game. And I think my love of digital pinball or video game pinball games came from this, because I played the crap out of this game when I got it. Like I said, it's also that scenario where you play what you got, whether you like it or not, because kid, 8th grade, don't have a job, no way of getting money except for maybe saving my lunch money. But at the time, Game Boy was still new, and you were not getting discounted games that soon, or clearance out games that soon. So, like, you played what you had, and I played this a lot, and I loved it. And I still enjoy it. It's a simple pinball game, but it's super fun. It's just a great time waster. I would play the crap out of that on those trips to and from Ohio as a kid. So, I was talking about there being a shmup that I was like, if this is as good as shmups get on the Game Boy, I'm going to be really pissed, until I played Nemesis. But the one I had as a kid, one of the first games we got, was Solar Striker. And this is a vertically scrolling shmup that is as basic as you can possibly get. It's just a tiny little ship. Every once in a while, a ship will come down from the top of the screen at you. You'll get some power-ups that give you a couple more shots to destroy your opponents, and it's really nothing to it. Fight a boss, move on to the next set of stages. It's simple as all hell. There's nothing really to it. Like, these are like first-generation Game Boy games. Nothing special. And I was really disappointed in this one. But what can you do? Like, first-generation games are not going to be the greatest. I need to step away for a split second. I need to blow my nose because I am getting clogged like you would not believe. I'll be back in 10 seconds, guys. I think like handling all of these games that have been sitting on my shelf gathering dust for a while activates my allergies, because I'll be sitting here doing these videos and all of a sudden my nose just gets super clogged and I get all phlegmy. But the moment the stream is over and I go into the next room, I'm perfectly fine. So I think it's just like these games are so dusty that just activate my allergies. What's up, Dan? How's it going? Welcome. I know. Here's Dan's favorite franchise. Star Trek 25th anniversary on the Game Boy. It's a port, sort of the NES game, which was kind of like an adventure, top-down Legend of Zelda style game adventure that is a bunch of different episodes of the classic television show that you get to play through. Only thing is, in this one, there are shmup levels where you're playing as the Enterprise going through asteroid fields, and sometimes there's Klingons and shit. You can see the top and bottom screen. You're playing as the Enterprise in space. But you're still going through episodes on foot as Kirk, McCoy, and Scotty. And it's really cool. I actually think that in some respects, this one is better than the NES game, because that one is strictly on foot stuff, and this one has the shmups to kind of mix it up every once in a while. So I enjoy it a lot. And I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so that had to be in my collection, because one of my goals is to get all the Star Trek games on top of all the Star Wars games. So Star Ocean is not here. Star Ocean is for the Game Boy Color. Game Boy Color. Game Boy Color gets its own video. Another Star Trek game. This one I never had back in the day, mostly because of the company that made it. And that is Star Trek Generations Beyond the Nexus. This is a licensed game based off of the Star Trek Generations movie, even though it acts like it's a sequel to it by calling it Beyond the Nexus. I don't know what that's all about. But this game was only available on handheld systems. It was only available on the Game Boy and the Game Gear. I own them both because I'm crazy. I did not want to buy it because of Absolute, because I had heard that the NES game, Star Trek The Next Generation, that was released by Absolute, was not the greatest, which is why I never owned it back in the day. And then I bought it as an adult, a few years back to talk about in a video, and I was like, oh yeah, this game is pretty terrible. But I'm never bought this because of all the shit that game got. But this has top-down adventure levels. You can see it on the top left. There's also like on the bridge shmup levels and stuff like that. And you're basically playing through the plot of the movie, but it's just not that great. It says it's based on the 7th Star Trek motion picture, but the subtitle kind of makes you think otherwise. And I'm not a big fan of Star Trek Generations. I was back when it came out. I saw it like 7 times in the theater. Nowadays, I watch it and I roll my eyes. But have to have all the Star Trek things, so there's that. And then this is the game that I didn't want to buy that, or the reason I didn't want to buy that game was because of Star Trek The Next Generation by Absolute. This got a port on the Game Gear. This is an NES game. They got a port to the Game Boy and the Game Gear. They all play exactly the same. They're all pretty shitty. My problem with it is it's just a bunch of mini games. It's not like there's a plot you're trying to follow. I mean, there's like a loose thing, like, oh yeah, you need to find the mystery of this so-and-so thing, and you got to do all this stupid crap on the way there. And it's like, okay, fight some Klingons. Okay, do a little cockpit Klingon target practice. You need to beam up some people from this planet. Okay, it's like playing whack-a-mole. You play as this little icon, and you're looking for people on the surface. You find one, you hit the button, and you beam them up, and then you go and look for another one. You want to enter orbit of a planet. You got to fly through rings like in Superman 64. It's not fun. And it's definitely not what I expected when I play a Star Trek game. I want to play a Star Trek game. You play like the Super Nintendo Next Generation game or the one that's on the Genesis. Those are like good Star Trek games because it's like a plot. It's like playing an episode of the show. This is not. And the reputation that game had is why I never bought Generations, even though I loved the movie at the time that it came out. On the other hand, we got that Star Wars. So this is a port of the NES game, the one we got in the US. It's weird. So, the NES game was released by JVC. This is a port of the NES game, and it's released by Capcom. What? Huh? It's the exact same game. You can even see it in the pictures. It's the exact same thing. It plays exactly the same, looks the same, sounds the same, just in black and white or pea green and piss. And the weird thing is, there's 2 different covers for this game. I got the one that I thought looked better, but there's another one that looks more like the movie poster, and I was like, no, this is more interesting, at least to me. So I don't know which one is more hard to find or rare, or what, if there's more of one compared to the other. But yeah, if you like the NES Super Star Wars game, you're going to like this. It's the same shit. I think it's okay. Then we have the sequel. We have The Empire Strikes Back. And this is a port of the NES game that I can't stand. I rented this game as a kid, and I was like, I will never own a copy of that game ever because it is so flippin' difficult. I never wanted to play it again in my life. So the only time I've actually paid money to own a copy of this is modern day. Bought this at the Midwest Gaming Classic, I think in 2018. I was like, want to get all the Star Wars games, even though I can't stand the game. I want to have it for the collection so I can have all the Star Wars things. And it's another platformer, and it is just hard as balls, man. I cannot get anywhere in this game. It's just so badly developed. I can't stand it. But you have to have it if you want to get all the Star Wars games. Next up is Super Mario Land. This is the game that my brother got for Christmas the year that we got our Game Boys. I got Alleyway, my brother got this. And I was like, I got the shit end of the stick. Even though this doesn't really play like a Mario game, it doesn't look like a Mario game. It doesn't really play like a Mario game because there's like the shmup or the shmup levels and all that. And everything is so tiny in it. It's kind of frustrating, but doesn't mean it's not fun. I played this way more than I played Alleyway. And I beat the pants off of it so many times too. And I want to say, what was it, like a year ago? I was like, you know what? I haven't played Mario Land in a long time. Maybe I'll just pop that in and give it a shot. And then, like, same thing that happened with Kirby. First time I sat down to play through this as an adult, I beat it on my first try without ever dying. It was like a no-death run. And I was like, I forgot that there were shmup levels in this. This is really cool. And I really enjoyed it. I need to get the sequels. I don't have any of them currently. I almost got the second one. A friend of mine went to Gen Con, like, 4 years ago, before COVID, and there's always like a vendor there that's selling video games, and he always takes a picture of the table and says, hey, do you want any of this? And you can pay me back later. And I told him there's a whole bunch of games I wanted from this table, and Mario 2 was one of them for the Game Boy. And that was the only one that he forgot to pick up. And I was kind of like, oh, come on. That was the one I was most looking forward to playing. But he got me a lot of other pretty cool games, so I was not sad. What's up, Red Sea? How's it going? It's going good, man. Talking about that Game Boy. What's up with you? Here's another rare game I had to have. Another game I knew nothing about. Did not know that this got a port to the Game Boy, but I was super happy that I found it. And then a Super RC Pro-Am. I had no clue that there was an RC Pro-Am game. I did not know that there was a part 2 on the NES until I started collecting as an adult. I'm a bad video game fan. But one of the rare games, so I have to have this, and it is exactly like the NES game. It's an isometric remote control car racing game, and it is super fun. Like, super fun. If you love the NES game as much as I do, this will hit the spot. It is so fun. You can just pick it up and play it any old time. I do exactly that. I love every second of it. I definitely need to get a copy of RC Pro-Am 2 on the NES, but it is so flippin' expensive, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But talked about Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. There's Super Return of the Jedi. What? So these two are ports of the NES games. This is a port of the Super Nintendo game. Huh? I never in a million years, I don't even remember this coming out, honestly, back in the day. I had no clue. It's also available on the Game Gear. What? I had no clue until I started collecting in 2013 that this was a thing. I did a search for like Star Wars Game Boy, and I was looking for Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, and standard Game Boy stuff. And this popped up, and I was like, when did that happen? I did not even know that was a thing. Why would anyone even attempt to adapt the Super Nintendo game, of all things, to a Game Boy? That doesn't make any sense. But it kind of works. Out of the 3 Game Boy games we got, this is the one that I played the most because I like the Super Nintendo Star Wars games so much, the Super Star Wars games, and this is a port of the third one. It just ends up being kind of cool that, number one, it's a Super Nintendo game port, and it's actually playable. It is actually pretty fun. You're playing through all the same stages. You got the selection of the characters and all that kind of stuff. Luke is still doing the little flips with the lightsaber. It's amazing that this actually exists in this form. I would have expected there to be a Return of the Jedi game in the style of the 2 other Star Wars games that we got based on the first 2 movies. But holy crap, the fact that this actually exists just blows my mind. And that it's able to be played, and it's not shit. Whew, my throat is getting so dry. Woo! It has to be the dust that's just drying me out and getting me all phlegmy. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Fall of the Foot Clan. My brother had this back in the day. Back when we were kids, I was not into the Turtles. I watched it every once in a while because my brother absolutely was like obsessed. So therefore, I ended up watching it more than I really wanted to. I was never really into it as much as he was. He had the toys. He wanted all the video games, coloring books, all that shit, the videotapes. So I ended up playing this because he had a copy of this. And I ended up playing it, I think, more than he did. I never actually beat it back in the day. I don't think he did either. I never really put that much time into it. But then when I got my copy as an adult, I played through this on the first try, and I was like 40 minutes, I think I was done. And I've done that a bunch of times. It turns out some Game Boy games are quite easy, especially the early ones. So it's pretty fun. It's a side-scrolling platformer / beat 'em up. You can play as whatever turtle you want. They play exactly the same. The only thing different is their weapon. And you're beating all the enemies up that you remember from the show. You got the foot, you got Bebop and Rocksteady, and you end up fighting Krang's ass at the very end. And it's pretty fun. It has a real short ending. Can't complain. If you're a Turtles fan, it's pretty cool. It's a little on the slower side, like Castlevania Adventure is. But I can't really complain because for a Game Boy title, it kind of works. Because like if things move too fast on that screen, everything gets kind of blurry. So the fact, I think that's why I liked Castlevania Adventure so much was I never knew. I always knew what I was looking at because there was never that blur factor. And the same thing with that. And I never played this back in the day because we never had it, but this is the same thing, and it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 Back from the Sewers. It's basically the exact same game as that, just a couple of tweaks have been made. There's a couple different play styles. Now you have like racing levels and stuff where you're like on a skateboard and stuff. But same thing, side-scrolling beat 'em up with the turtles, can't complain. Like I said, never played this one back in the day, but as an adult, I really need to sit down and play through this now that I've played through the first one. But I really, really want to get a copy of the third one. I did have a cart-only copy that I got in a trade. Some dude in one group I was in on Facebook put up a post once, and he was just like, look, I'm kind of getting out of playing games. I really want to like amp up my horror movie memorabilia collection. If anyone has any horror stuff that they're interested in getting rid of, let me know. And I was like, yeah, I've got all these excess posters that I've been buying for like years that I don't really have room for. I don't have enough wall space to hang these things up. I told him, I'm like, oh, I have these posters if you want them. I have an original one sheet from Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and an original one sheet from Nightmare on Elm Street 4 that I'm willing to part with. And he like got so excited. He's like, oh shit, I'm going to send you a whole shitload of stuff. And I was like, okay, I'll believe it when it shows up, if it shows up at all. And what I ended up getting in that package was a completed box Contra, a completed box Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and Turtles 3 for the Game Boy, but it was just the cartridge. Since I don't do loose, I ended up trading off the loose cartridge, but I kept the Contra and the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Those are the ones I have in my collection right now. And I think he sent me he sent me a Link action figure that's still in the package too. I have it out in my living room. And I was like super thrilled. I was like, I didn't think I was going to get this much stuff for those posters, but holy shit. The third game for the Turtles is actually like a Metroidvania, and that just sounds fantastic to me. I need to own that game, but it is kind of pricey. They did have a completed box copy of it at my local store, Video Games Then and Now, but the guy wanted like $250 for it, and I was like, the only way I'm going to be able to get that is if I sell a bunch of stuff, and I don't have anything I really want to sell, so I'm going to have to pass on that. You're surprised it wasn't in the Cowabunga? It's not? The third Game Boy game's not in there? I thought it was. Here is a licensed game that I think everybody needs to play, because out of all the games that have come out based on this particular movie, I do feel this is the best one. It just so happens to be on the Game Boy. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So I kind of enjoy the NES version. It's not great, but it's not terrible. The Super Nintendo / Genesis ones are poop. And I think the Game Gear version is based on the NES. Sorry, not the NES. The Game Boy. Oh, God, I can't even talk right now. I'm getting like so phlegmy. It's like distracting me. It's based more on the Super Nintendo and Genesis games than anything else. This one is completely different from them all. This one is like a bunch of different play styles. There's puzzle stuff. There's shooter stuff. There's Metal Gear Solid type stuff. You start off playing as John Connor, and it's up here where you're trying to find all of these. There's these like radio towers, and you need to destroy the broadcast equipment that's at the top of each one in a specific order. And once you do that, you go into the Terminator factory, and you have to reprogram a Terminator. You actually have to do circuitry type puzzle stuff where you like turn the circuitry in different directions to get the charge to flow through the right way to reprogram a Terminator. Then you go into the past and you do the whole ravine thing with John Connor on the motorcycle and all that. And then you end up doing like stuff where you're going through Cyberdyne and the Foundry at the end of the movie. And it is super fun. It is well done. The music is actually pretty cool. The graphics are really nice. And I remember playing this all the time on my Game Boy. This is one of those games that did not annoy me and make me wish I had some sort of a light that I can see, because it made sense. Like there wasn't enough clutter on the screen to to completely hide what you're looking at. Like the foreground did not blend into the background like a lot of games did. And the blur was not very present. But for a licensed game, this one does it. This one is actually pretty cool. I like this one the most out of any of the Terminator 2 games that were available at the time. Highly recommend it. Check it out. It's dirt cheap now. And then we got that pack-in game. This was actually the first game I bought for my Game Boy when I got back into collecting in 2013. Because I was like, if I remember correctly, this game was it was the pack-in game, Tetris. It was the pack-in game that came with everyone's Game Boy at the beginning, but it didn't have a box. It was just the cart. And I guess later on, when different packages of the Game Boy, like the Game Boy just alone by itself was a thing, you had to buy Tetris somehow, so it came out in like a standalone edition. And just like Super Mario Brothers on the NES and Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo, getting the standalone versions in the box are pretty pricey. So when I found this dirt cheap on eBay, I jumped on it because I was like, yeah, I need to get this while it's cheap, or maybe the person's slipping or whatever, because I don't think it's going to be expensive for long. I don't think it's ever been expensive. This is probably one of the most common games out there, period. But yeah, puzzle game with blocks. Everybody knows what the hell Tetris is. Do I really need to spend time describing what this is all about? But like everybody else, I played the ever-loving crap out of it on the Game Boy back in the day. Loved it. Everybody loved it. Everyone was playing head-to-head. You can play head-to-head, right? Yeah, this one has the... Was it? Yeah, the Game Link. I knew it had the Game Link. But yeah, everyone I knew was playing this. I remember I played it a couple times with the Link. Mostly with my brother, and I whooped his ass. Here's a classic I never had. I got this at the same time I got Kirby's Dream Land at that Make Sense variety store back in 2018. And that is Wave Race. This came before Wave Race 64. Everyone remembers Wave Race 64. That's the sequel to this. Only thing is, this one is a top-down racing game on jet skis, and it does not play that great. It is kind of horrible, honestly. I never played this back in the day. I did not even know that this game existed. All I knew about was Wave Race 64. So when I saw this at the store, and it was dirt cheap, I think this was like $20 or less than $20, I was like, oh, sure, give it to me now. And then I got home and tried it out, and I was like, wow, I made a mistake. It is just not fun. The fact that Nintendo actually said, let's break that license out of mothballs and give it a 3D remake, and then it actually ends up being like a classic on the Nintendo 64, I never would have thunk it with this. It's not great. Hey, what's up, Game Room? How's it going? Good to see you. I'm almost done. Only got 2 games left. Here's another one I did not know existed until I got back into collecting as an adult. That is Wizards and Warriors 10, Fortress of Fear. So we got Wizards and Warriors 1, 2, and 3 on the NES. And then we got part 10 on the Game Boy. What happened to parts 4 through 9? I really want to know. I actually made a video on my channel like years and years and years ago about franchises that need to be like resurrected nowadays. And one of the licenses or titles that I picked was Wizards and Warriors. I want parts 4 through 9. But this one changes it up a little bit. Instead of it being like that vertically type platformer adventure game, this one is basically just a side-scrolling like hack and slash. A couple of puzzle elements mixed into it, but for the most part, it's just completely side-scrolling. Look for a key, get into a door kind of thing. It's not bad. It's definitely better than some of the NES games. I'll always have a soft spot for Iron Sword. I don't know why, I just do. Played the shit out of that as a kid. But it's pretty cool, and it's completely different. If you are not a fan of the way the NES games play, but you kind of like the license alone, get this one. This one is totally different. And it's by Rare, which is one of the things I need to do is get all the Rare games, so absolutely had to have it. Great to be here. I'm glad you're here, dude. And the last game I have to talk about for the Game Boy is WWF King of the Ring. Had to get this because Rare developed it. Rare did a lot of shit on the Game Boy, everybody. It is a standard one-on-one wrestling game. Captain Algebra, I don't know if he streamed this one or not, but he like texted me and he was just kind of like, yeah, that game was like super easy. I beat it in like the first playthrough. It's just so easy. But it's fun. He said it wasn't bad. It was just fun. It's just super short. But had to get it because I'm not a huge wrestling fan or at all. I used to like wrestling when I was like a little kid. I think in 3rd grade was when I stopped watching wrestling. And all my friends continue to like it through the years. Still, some of them still do. And I don't get it, but whatever. So I play the games if the games are fun, not because I'm a fan. So I had to get this because of Rare being the developer. and it's not that great. It's not that bleh. It's not that bad from what I am told. So there's that. I still have not played that. And I think I got this last year. I got this at Freak Toys, and I'm going back there this Saturday also. So my pickup video at the end of the month should be pretty cool because I usually find some rad stuff when I'm there. There's one specific thing I'm looking for at Press Start, and I hope it's still there when I go there on Saturday. But outside of that, I have a ton of credit left to spend there, and plus a $10 off my purchase coupon that expires at the end of the month, and I need to use it before it gets wasted. So that's it for this video. These are all my current Game Boy games. That's kind of a lot for me. I thought it was less. I do need to get more. They do have a lot at Freak Toys. So when I go there this weekend, I do think one of the things I'm going to focus on is if they have any decent titles available for the Game Boy, I might just have to pick those up. I will be back next week, starting off the first part of probably a 3-part series about my Sega Genesis collection. You know, you can kind of see it all right here. Yeah, that's going to have to be broken up into 3 parts because otherwise it's going to be like a 12-hour stream, and my throat can't take it. I'm struggling right now. I feel like I'm already losing my voice, and I've only been talking for like an hour and a half. But yeah, I'll be back next Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Central. First part of my Sega Genesis collection. And then tomorrow, there is another new short that I'm going to be releasing probably in the afternoon. Hope you like it. It's another like 3 games you need to own for a console. Those seem to be pretty popular. So I got a bunch of those that I'm working on, and I hope you enjoy it. I will talk to you all next time. Thank you again for being here and hanging out with me tonight and talking video games and stuff. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you again next week. Chris, the old-ass retro gamer, out. Have a good night, everybody, and stay safe.